Good evening, and welcome to tonight's Rapid City Council meeting for Monday, June 18th, 2018. The mayor's out of town today, so I will be presiding over the meeting. We will begin with a roll call and determination of quorum. Maybe. Looks like yeah. So we're almost there. No. We're waiting. Yep. Okay. Got some more public comments. Thank you. And as Heidi makes her way around, we will begin with roll call and determination of quorum. Thank you, Heidi.
Scott? Here. Drew? Here. Nordstrom? Here. Modrick? Here. Solomon?
Here.
Lewis? Here. Armstrong? Here. Laurenti? Here. Drury? Here. Roberts?
We have a quorum. Thank you very much. Next, we'll have an invocation from Dale Barcher. Dale, if you want to come and rise with me, and you're free to participate or not, whatever you would like.
Good evening. Let's pray. Father, we come to you grateful for another day of life and for the rain that so refreshes our sun-parched land. It has been said that prayer isn't all that we should do, but we should do nothing until we have prayed. And so tonight, we begin here and now in prayer. Our community, as always, is in transition, and Lord, we know it takes great wisdom, effort, and unity to keep her on a right course. Come alongside tonight's council meeting. Bless these servants of our city and their families as they seek our community's greater good. May we leave here remembering that all authority in heaven and earth has been given to you and you alone. Yes, we live, breathe, and serve at your pleasure. We pray tonight in the name of the one who is the same yesterday, today, and forever, the Lord our God. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. We have a motion by Scott and a second by Armstrong. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is adopted. We'll now move to the awards and recognitions portion of the evening, and we have some representatives here from the Historic Preservation Committee, Carol Saunders, Brittany Nealis, I hope I got that right, and Sarah Hansel.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, all right. The Rapid City Historic Preservation Commission would like to commend the following 3 projects for excellent work in renovating and rehabilitating iconic places in and around the historic district in downtown Rapid City. Through the Norm E. Nelson Preservation Achievement Award, we celebrate local efforts to reimagine and retrofit historic buildings in a way that respects and preserves our community's history, while also bringing us into the future. These types of projects ensure that treasured places will continue to productively serve the community for future generations of Rapid City residents and visitors.
For the first award, may I have Carol Johnson and Karen Mortimer with South Dakota Public Broadcasting, as well as Jeremy Altman from JLG Architects. Come up to this front here, please.
The first award category is for demonstrating excellence in the redevelopment of historic property. This award goes to JLG Architects and South Dakota Public Broadcasting Black Hills Studio for the rehabilitation of 415 Main Street. The building is a prime example of the Western Art Deco movement. It was built in 1946, originally as the Casper Supply Company, and later known as the Parts Central Building. In reimagining the space as studios for South Dakota Public Broadcasting, JLG worked to retain key Art Deco historical elements of the building while creating flexibility and incorporating more natural light into the space.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
For the next award, we'll have Jeremy stay up here, actually, and I would like to invite Robert Lemley to join us up here.
This second category is for adaptive reuse in a commercial setting. This award goes to JLG Architects and Landstrom's Golden Creations, LLC, for the redevelopment of the Landstrom's building at 405 Canal Street. This building was constructed as a power station in the 1920s and then operated as a gold manufacturing company. Now, in its third life, the structure is home to retailers and offices, as well as a coffee shop and brewery. The renovation introduced modern facade elements while retaining its industrial feel.
And for the third award, would Bill Barber join us at the podium, please?
Third category is for adaptive reuse in a residential setting. This award goes to GBA Inc. for the redevelopment of the Garfield Elementary School, located at 925 Dilger Avenue, into a multi-family apartment. Garfield School was constructed in 1908 and served the community as a schoolhouse for nearly 100 years. It now contains 12 living units and still conveys much of its historic integrity. The Garfield is proud that each of the 12 units features historic elements from the school.
Thank you very much. Okay. On behalf of the Historic Preservation Commission, I'd like to congratulate and thank each of the award recipients.
One other short plug for the Historic Preservation Commission. They've just wrapped up their grant funding project for the year, which is a historic architecture walking tour of the downtown area. So you'll see these around downtown locations, and there's also a website, picturercpass.com, and we encourage you to take a look at this great material that's been provided by the Historic Preservation Commission.
Okay, next up on our agenda is a presentation from budget analyst Sean Kerbanoff regarding priority-based budgeting. Sean.
Good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, and honorable council members. This presentation is kind of overdue, but I thought that what could be a better way to cheer you up on this gloomy day, and decided to present priority-based budgeting. Actually, we've been working on priority-based budgeting for quite some time. This is our second year of implementation. But what we wanted to achieve before we present the data to you is to have all the initial rollout kinks straightened. So I hope this time I won't have technical difficulties. I would like to start off by offering a quote by a political scientist, Richard Fenno, who said, "The form of the budget determines what the conversation will be about." So depending on what a budget document or a budget process focuses on, that alone can have a huge impact on what priorities a governing body or the city or a government in general pursues. Now, when I talk about the focus, the city government is in the business of providing services. It's a service organization. So we have a process of providing services, and as any process, we can divide we can divide it into different distinct components. So we have inputs, things that we buy, salaries that we pay, uniforms that we buy for our uniform personnel. Then we have activities that we perform using those resources, or outputs, or we can call them programs. These are the streets patrolled, arrests made, and so on and so forth. And finally, all that is done to achieve certain outcomes. In the case of the city, it's the safer place to live, it's a healthier population, it's better transportation and transit system. But with that said, in many cases, what you will find in city, what happens in local governments is that most of the focus is on inputs. So we have a budget that is on the left. That's actually a printout from the accounting system from today. And you can see that we have almost 200,000 lines of different things that we purchase. And I would invite you to ask yourself a question. What is it are we talking about when we look at this budget? We basically ask a question, how much, what we are spending money on, and how much we are spending money on, but we don't quite clearly ask the question, what are we going to do with that, and how it will impact the health, the safety of the community, and all those other outcomes. So the incremental budgeting that we have, or many other governments have, for that matter, looks at how certain costs or aggregates of certain costs increase from year to year, and the governing body asks the question, why is this component is growing at 4% rather than 2% as other components? And that's the conversation that that governments normally have. What priority-based budgeting allows us to do is to break that cycle and focus on the other two components, that is outputs and outcomes. And we do that by introducing programs. So instead of this 200,000 lines of items, we focus on activities. And each department within the city would identify the things that they do, the set of activities that they perform, and those activities are aggregated into programs. For example, police patrol, or for that matter, budgeting. And all the costs that are contained in the normal line item budget, or the traditional budget with 200,000 lines, would be allocated to those programs. And we have around 800 or 807 programs, to be exact, that actually answer the question, what do we do? Not just what do we buy, but what do we do with the money? Priority-based budgeting goes beyond that and tries to answer the question, how does what we do actually contribute and lead to the outcomes? And that's where we have the scoring component of priority-based budgeting, where we score all programs based on things like whether they are mandated, whether they are solely relied on the city, whether the demand for the program goes up or goes down from year to year, whether the program serves a bigger portion of the population or a smaller portion of the population. But the majority or the chunk of the weighting or the scoring comes from the program's alignment or contribution to the city's strategic goals. And where do those strategic goals come from? They come from the 2014 strategic plan that was adopted, and it was a long process of adoption and review where stakeholders, citizens, and their input was taken in coming up with this list of goals that the city exists to achieve. So we as the city exist to provide a safe environment for the population. We try to provide the best possible infrastructure, roads and other infrastructure. And as I mentioned, all these programs get scored by first departments, and they then the scoring is reviewed by an impartial group of people, a peer review team, and which is comprised of staff members. And this year we were fortunate to have some council members as well on that peer review committee. So with that said, just having given you the underlying kind of philosophy behind priority-based budgeting, I would like to present you the online tools that you can use in order to access the data and hopefully act on that data. So we have 4 different distinct online tools. One that is used by the super users, those who administer the priority-based budgeting process. One is used by the staff. Each department has access to a dashboard. And another one is a tool that the council has access to. And that's where I want to start. So every time you log in to the priority-based budgeting tool or portal, what you will see is a map of all the implementers of priority-based budgeting. So currently there are more than 200 implementers, local governments, city governments, county governments. I believe there is a school district that started implementing. So we are not alone. So we are the pioneers. We are in the beginning of the movement, but we are not alone. And some of this community, for example, Boulder and other communities, have been implementing this process for 8 years now. So what you will have is this PBB overview tab on top. And it basically presents you the breakdown of different programs. On the top, if you look at the bar chart on the top, you will see that the programs are divided into two categories. And those two categories are governance or internal programs and community or external programs. That is, the programs that serve the end user, the community itself, whereas the internal programs or governance programs, those are programs that serve internal users, for example, HR, finance. If you look, for example, here, you will see that the majority of internal or governance programs are comprised by finance, IT, human resources, and mayor's office, whereas the community programs, as you expect, it's public works, fire, and police, and all other departments. Now, I've talked about the results and where they come from. They are based on the strategic plan, the Rapid Cities 2014 strategic plan, and that plan was was used to determine all these strategic goals that each program is scored against, and each of these goals is further divided into separate categories. So what departments and peer review committees do, they really analyze how each of these programs contribute to each of these goals or defined sub-goals. And the more alignment we have, the higher the score that the program receives. And if you look at the information on this, under this tab, I hope it won't take too long. You will see that we are contributing to the six, if you take the community programs, to the six strategic goals differently. Most of the contribution goes to the safety, the vibrant and livable community, and you will also notice that the total amount that is budgeted for all the programs contributing to different results is more than the budget itself. That's not a coincidence. It's just because of the fact that each program can contribute to more than one goal. And that's why the total amount is more than the budget itself. Now, most of the work that the council will do is probably going to be under the analysis tool pack. It's a set of tools that you can use in order to really dig deeper into the data and see what each program stands for, its description, how much it costs in terms of FTE, in terms of non-personnel costs, what its scoring is, and start asking questions. Are we, do we really need to fund this program at this level? Should we bump up the resources allocated to the program, or maybe reduce the budget for the program? So what you will see is the overall allocation of all the of the entire budget of the city. And you will also notice here that it's a little, not little, but by about 40% less than the budget, the adopted budget for 2018. And that's because PBB focuses only on recurring programs. It doesn't take into account capital improvements and debt service. What you can do here is click around and see, for example, which programs contribute most or which programs are in quartile 1. So you will have a division of program scoring into quartile 1, quartile 2, quartile 3, and quartile 4. And all this quartile system shows how aligned a certain program is with the community results. So if you have a program in quartile 1, that means that that program contributes strongly to many results within this result definition map. And you can also filter all your programs based on the quartile, based on the basic program attributes such as mandate and so on and so forth. For example, if you would like to see, in an unfortunate event that we have a revenue shortage, you want to determine what programs to really focus on in order to come up with reductions, for example. You can focus on quartile 4, quartile 3 programs and see that we have about almost $9 million worth of programs that we can look closely into to see if we can reallocate some of the resources from those programs. And you can further click on these bars and see what each quartile consists of and what program scoring is. And if you want this in a more tabular form, you can hit the table tab here, and everything will be presented in a tabular form. You can also if you are more inclined to have this information in a less interactive form, you can also go to this tab here and generate a report that will generate a report for all the programs. And you can further go to program manual PDF and print out a report for certain departments, and that will have even more information, including costs, including the positions that contribute to certain programs and non-personnel costs. With that said, I would like to kind of give you a few things as important things to remember. Quartiles do not really tell if a program is important. If you look at any of the 807 programs and ask people if it's important, you will get a definitive yes, it is important. Especially if those people you're asking are beneficiaries of the programs or maybe implementers of the programs, they will say it is important. So priority-based budgeting doesn't answer the question of importance. It answers the questions of how aligned programs are with the community goals. So if you have two programs and one program, and again, they may be deemed equally important, but one program contributes more towards more results, you would be better off allocating more resources to that program than the other. Now, the second point is that PBB is a tool. It is as useful as you use it. You can make it useful, you can make it less useful by not using it. And for example, as I mentioned, we can have a year where our revenues will grow more than we expected. You can use PBB in order to allocate more money into programs that are more aligned with community goals. If it's a economic slowdown situation, you will have to look at programs with lower quartile and allocate less to them or cut their funding. But if you, for example, in a situation of an economic slowdown, decide to cut everything equally just because it's equally, it's basically saying that you are not allocating resources in a strategic way. You don't do that in your household. You don't say, okay, my salary unexpectedly increased by 3%, let's increase all the spending by 3%, or cut every spending by 3%. You have priorities, and the city does as well. Now, PBB is collaborative. It requires the input from departments, from the council, from the mayor's office, and from citizens as well. And as such, what I also have today is presentation of the open data portal for citizens. So you can go to this link here and see all the programs that the city has to offer, their relative scoring by each category, and ask questions. Send me an email or send your representative an email. So get involved. And we will be posting this link on the city's website tomorrow. And going back to PBB being tool, it is used and quite effectively. And I wanted to give you an example from Boulder, Colorado, in other communities. I apologize for that. As you can see, Boulder, as I mentioned, has been implementing PBB for 8 consecutive years. And if you look at the allocation of the resources, they clearly allocate more resources to quartile 1, quartile 2 programs, whereas they are cutting back on funding for quartile 4 programs. Now, what's ahead? We are early implementers. We only have been implementing PBB for 2 years, but I'm hoping we can harness the full potential of PBB because it's quite a flexible framework, and we can use it to score new programs. When a program comes forward for your consideration, you can apply the PBB scoring before that in order to see how it contributes to achieving community goals. Now, another avenue that can be explored is applying PBB to the CIP process. As I mentioned, PBB only focuses on recurring costs, and it doesn't really take into account capital costs. And CIP it can be implemented there. Shawnee, Kansas, for example, implements or has a separate set of PBB tools for their CIP. It doesn't have to be the same set of scoring criteria. It can be different. And finally, if we really want to know how we are achieving goals rather than how we are allocating resources to achieving goals, and we want to see progress, we can implement key performance indicators for each of the programs that we have. For example, if we have police patrol, we can look at how the safety perception by residents through a survey and so on. And that is probably it for my presentation. Now I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Sean. We have in the queue Councilwoman Amanda Scott.
Thank you. And may I ask Sean a couple questions, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sean, I'd like to start by saying thank you for starting this conversation. This was really good as far as showing us the tools that are available and stuff, so I really appreciate you coming forward early in our budget process for 2019. So with that said, thank you. But now that you've done a great job explaining priority-based budgeting, I got to let you know, us old people from the old school of having those 800 lines or 2,000 lines, it's going to take us a while to get to here in understanding how to cut. So one of the things you said is we really shouldn't cut across the board. My pushback to you is if the staff and the mayor do their jobs and they have a balanced budget, we don't have to look at cutting across the board. By the time the city council gets the budget, we have like 30 days to get through it. So the last 2 years, the mayor balanced the 2017 budget with $3.5 million out of undesignated cash. For the 2018 budget, he balanced it with $1.3 million additionally out of undesignated cash. Our current financing shows that we're on target to be dipped into our reserves $2 million by the end of this year, unless we see a major gain in revenues. So I like where you're going with this. I took some really good notes. Here are my questions. You did say that the public is going to be able to view this. You're putting the link on the website tomorrow. That's not what you showed us as city council members for logging in. This is the first time we've seen it too, or at least this is the first time that I've seen it. In case anybody else has seen it, I don't know. But when do we get to log in and start using the tool?
I believe I sent out an email with the link about 5-6 weeks ago.
Okay.
I can resend it to you.
Please do, because if you sent it out 5 or 6 weeks ago with without this presentation, I can tell you, I didn't go anywhere near it. Have you ever gone to these places where they send you a link and you click on it and then you're still lost? Remember I told you we're old,
I have.
okay? I won't talk about everybody on the council. I'm old, okay? So you have to walk me through until I understand how to operate this tool.
I'll make sure to send it to you.
Thank you. And then when you sent it to us, do we just have one generic login for city council members, or do we each have our own?
You each had your own.
Okay. And when the public, when they click on their link, is it just how much of what the city council sees does the public get to see?
They don't need to log in, and it's a more simplified version of what you see as a council. But if they want to dig into the data, they are always welcome to either ask a question on that website. There is a form. Actually, go back to it. I hope. There is a form down below on that web page that they can use to send a message, and it will directly come to me, and I will try to respond as soon as possible. But I will also be putting a generated report for 2018 PBB data on the city's website.
Okay. And so thank you for that. And thank you for putting up with this old person, because you're going to have to get me up to speed on this. Well, it is when it comes to this, because I think we've been waiting over 2 years to get this, and it's pretty, but I can tell you it's going to take me hours to get through how to use this tool. So, and then the multiple questions I have, the couple points that you pointed out is, number one, when you take a look at all the programs, it's way over our current budget. And then when you got down to certain quartiles or something, it didn't include the capitalization project. So that information is like interesting, but it's not helpful when we're looking at a budget. So here's my next question to you. How is the mayor using this in his 2019 budget presentation to us? Is he going to bring us a balanced budget, or is he going to bring us a budget that's dipping into undesignated cash again, and then our job is to do all this homework ahead of time to figure out where we can take reductions? Or is he tackling where to take those reductions in order to match our expenditures to the revenue coming in?
I can't answer this question definitively. What I can say is that we will be basing many of the proposals on PBB.
Okay. Do you have any idea when the mayor plans on presenting the 2019 budget?
I would have to resort to Pauline. She probably knows.
Pauline, any idea? I know he's been busy, so is it in July, or are we looking at August? I know we have to have it done by October.
Yeah, the original goal was to have it, I believe, at the second Monday in July. I'm not sure if we're still on track for that or not. I will also answer your previous question. His intent is to provide a balanced budget to you. He knows how much has to be cut. The direction to the department directors has been to look at our individual PBB, how it all pans out, look at those fourth quartile programs, see where we can maybe cut those. So that's the direction that's been given.
Okay. Thank you, Pauline, and thank you, Sean. I figured when you were presenting this that the mayor probably has already been instrumental in using it. Glad to hear that staff is already using it. And is it, well, maybe Pauline, I should ask you this question rather than Sean. Sean, I know you're available to answer our questions as city council members or the public, if any of the public has any questions when they're trying to navigate through this tool as well. But is the staff up to speed? Are you guys up to speed on this, that if we start poking around, we can call you guys and say, no? Yes? I'm seeing one head yes, kind of, sort of, the bobbly head in the car. So kind of, sort of. So maybe we should start with Sean first, and then direct to another staff member, or would you rather start with a staff department director and then come back? Sean?
And that's exactly why I mentioned that PBB is a collaborative process. Everybody needs to be involved in it, and as much as possible in order for it to be effective.
Alderwoman Scott, you're out of time by quite a bit.
All right. So if I may just say this then, Council President, now that we as a council have had this, it may behoove us, I know time is short, to have a working session to try to dig into this and teach individual people such as myself.
To be clear, Sean has shared this with the council weeks ago, and I also reshared it for him to make sure we were all starting to dig around and get comfortable with the concepts. But we can discuss that at some point. Well, what you do on your time is one thing. We have Alderman Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, President Solomon. Do you need a motion to acknowledge this first?
Yeah, please.
If I may make that motion to acknowledge this report first.
Okay, we got a motion by Alderman Nordstrom and a second by Alderwoman Modrick.
I may retain the floor. Sure. Sean, I too want to applaud you and thank you for this presentation. I know you spent hours and hours on this. I've been waiting for 5 years to see this come to fruition. I saw this program as a presentation back when I had an opportunity to go to the National League of Cities in Seattle and saw it, and I was sold on it right then, and we got to get this back here to Rapid City. So I'm glad you came on board. We're involved in this from the get-go and got us to the city council members to get exposed to it, to see that opportunity, to do the scoring on this. We didn't agree on a lot of the scoring, but we came up with some kind of a consensus at the end of this. We've got a lot more work to do with it, and I would encourage each and every council member to get on there and just play with it. I've gone into other cities that have this program available already and had a chance to play with it in other cities. Can't mess with their budget. You can't change anything on it, but just get in there and play with it, and you can get a good feel on how the city of Rapid City will be working. I'm looking forward to actually getting this opportunity now to do a little bit more in greater detail about the things that we can work with, and being that the mayor will be coming forward with the presentation, I'm sure we'll still have debates about, is this the proper score? Is this the proper funding amount? Those kinds of questions will be coming up. So it isn't set in stone by the time it reaches us at the city council, at the city council budget hearings process. We'll still have some opportunities for input on it. And watching the other cities that were involved in this and how they did it, how they scored it, there was lots of debate that took place in those other municipalities that had this program in place. Council members took quite a bit of time in those other municipalities to study that program and see how this whole system works. And the public is definitely invited to participate in getting that reaction and feel and understanding what you can see, what's going on with the budget. And then please, by all means, address those comments to either to us or to Sean Kerbanoff to bring those comments forward. This is step one, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the step two, and then next year when we get into CIP. And then, Sean, there's one other module that fits onto this program that I think will help us out even further, that as we get down the line and a better understanding of how this works, using Boulder, Colorado as 8 years, and they've got an additional module that they use. And it shows income and expenses, revenue, and outgo. And we can track it as we go along. So it's almost like live. We can see the actual income and expenses as we go along. So I'm looking forward to seeing this next step, third step, and so on. And I'm not talking about dance steps either. So I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for this presentation. It's a great starter, and hopefully other council members will jump on this, play with it, work with it, and you'll be coming up with a better understanding how this whole system works. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, Sean, real quick, you'd be open to doing a workshop for council members who are interested?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next up, we did, excuse me, yeah. So we have a motion on the floor to acknowledge. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Vice President. Next up, we have general public comment. This is a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the council members present. I have a good number of forms here, and first we'll begin with Jackie Tropel. And Jackie, you have 3 minutes for your public comment, and these lights up here will let you know. Green light, you're good to go. Yellow light, you have 30 seconds, and red light means your time's up.
Okay, hopefully I can do this, if I can figure out how to operate this thing.
We can have them bring the microphone down to you, too, if you need to.
Okay, my name is Jackie Tropel. I came here to talk to you about the heavy rains on May 18th, 2018 that flooded me out of my apartment at 24.5 Clark Street. Only 2 inches of rain fell that afternoon. However, due to the ineffective drainage on the newly renovated Mount Rushmore Road, water still overflowed and ran down the side streets on the west side of Mount Rushmore Road. Around 7 o'clock, I heard water rushing. I went to open the door to my foyer and found water had flooded with 6 to 8 inches of water. I grabbed my purse, my cell phone, and attempted to leave the door, but it was jammed. I called 911 to let them know I could not exit. I was panicked because the force of the water had caused my door to cave in. I was able to exit through the screen door, but it only seemed like a minute, but it would seem like forever. This is the door right here. You can see how the water forced it. I went upstairs to get shelter from my neighbor Mark, but realized my cat was still downstairs. I called the fire. The fire department got there in time to retrieve my 16-year-old cat. I had no shoes, only a shirt and t-shirt. I spent the night at my brother's-in-law until I could come back and return in the morning. I walked into total devastation. All of my furniture had been damaged or destroyed, my clothes and most of my crafting supplies. I have insurance, but because the water came from the outside, I am not covered. I will still have to replace most of my belongings. I have several neighbors who also lost personal belongings and are probably not covered by their homeowner's insurance or their renter's insurance. These are pictures of what my interior of my apartment looked like. On the June 6th celebration that was held at Wilson Park for a job well done at the completion of the work on Mount Rushmore Road. This work is not done. Water should have never left Mount Rushmore Road in the volume that it did if the drains were working according to what was promised at the onset. Every update published by Ferber Engineering indicates the storm sewer installation was taking place. The city is responsible for the property damage that my neighbors and I suffered. I continue to have anxiety when I think about what I've been through. My family, my employer, and friends are very supportive of me. Now I need the city to step up and take the responsibility. Thank you. And these are some additional pictures.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up, we have Randy Horsley.
Hi. My name is Randy Horsley with the Horsley Agency of Farmers Insurance here in town. I am here on the behalf of several of my clients, one of which is also here with us and is the next door neighbor of Ms. Tropel that just spoke. She is exactly right. The damages that incurred from that water damage in that area are not going to be covered under virtually any insurance policy. All of those rising surface waters are considered flood and therefore typically not covered by any regular home or renter's policy. Flood is completely different. It's FEMA, it's federally regulated. Unless someone actually has a flood policy on their home, they will not be able to have coverage in that type of situation. I'm here because not only these clients here, but my client as the Lazy U Motel on Mount Rushmore Road experienced a similar situation. They had the new sewer drain that was put into the back corner of their lot for the exact same purpose of draining all the excess water that was coming from up the hill as part of this project. And the way it was designed actually caused, because the water coming down from the top of the hills was at such a volume, it actually held shut the cap that allows the drainage for his motel. So his motel had 5 feet of standing water behind it. It flooded through every single one of the air conditioners on his property and flooded 9 of his rooms. That hotel has been here for almost 30 years and has never had a water loss. It was not until this situation with the new construction, the 8th Street construction that has come from this, that he has seen this water loss, just as their homes and just as I'm sure 100 homes in this city have seen the excess of water losses from this situation. Now, I'm here frustrated because when I get a call from a client that says that they have a problem, or they have a claim, or they have something I need to take care of, it's my job to take care of that. And when I come there and I have to tell them, I can't do anything for you, it drives me insane. If there's anything that would ever make me quit insurance, it would be having to tell a client that they are not covered. And this kind of situation is not normal. This is an anomaly. This was something that was created by the new project. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the project. I don't have a problem with it in itself, but the drainage, the water problem, this is a problem. It is only going to get worse. Every single time we have a major rainstorm, we are only going to see this problem happen again and again. And I also implore the city to do something about it. My particular clients in this case are not greedy people. All they want is their stuff fixed. And unfortunately, I don't have the means to do that for them other than to come to these kind of meetings and see if there's anything I can do. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mark McGrath.
Which button do you push? There we go. All right. I'm Mark McGrath. I live on 824 Clark Street. I'm the upstairs neighbor of Jackie. These are just some quick photos of after the rain had actually had time to settle. Before this happened, the rain was coming clear out through here and pouring down off of Mount Rushmore Road as well. Next, just more images of it. Water was pouring down Mount Rushmore Road. If you look here, there's some boards. Now, these boards were actually located originally a few blocks up from my house, and they were forced down after tearing down that fence and pushed down into my property there. This is some of the aftermath of what I came to the next day, just scattered belongings throughout my laundry room. And here where the water had actually forced in and knocked over my storage unit. You can see my deep freeze here that had been lifted up and tilted onto the side. Pretty much the same sentiment that everybody else has expressed is that I truly believe this is caused by the Mount Rushmore Road renovation. I don't think that it's designed to handle the water flow that we experienced. Right now, I look at the city as if you guys have been in a fender bender and you felt the bump, and now you're just sitting in your car looking around to see if anybody saw you do it. And if no one saw, then you're going to drive away and act like nothing happened. Well, I'm here right now, and we have a few more people that are saying that we see it. We saw this happen. So you need to get out of your car, and you need to actually give us the information that we need in order to replace our property. I know there's a lot of other people that have been through this, and the reason they're not here is not from fault of their own, but it's fault from what we have going on now is where nothing's actually getting done, in my opinion. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, similar item, Sean Cruel.
Hi. I was affected by the water, but was in a different way. I left my gutters off when I was doing gardening, and of course the rain came on that night and I got water in the basement. That's not really included in my insurance. It was my own negligence in doing that. That kind of flooding is the type of flooding that my insurance doesn't cover. If I were in a logical area down by Rapid Creek or any other area that was designated as a flood zone, I would have had flood insurance. I don't have flood insurance up on a hill. I wouldn't need it. And there's no reasonable expectation that any of these people, Lazy U Motel at the top of Mount Rushmore Road, nor Mark, nor Jackie, nor any of the other people that aren't here this evening, but possibly will later once they know the conversation has been broached, that if they would have known that they had to carry flood insurance, if they had been alerted that they would have had to carry flood insurance prior to the implementation of a public works project, I have a feeling that either A, the public works project would have been redesigned, or it never would have happened. So to leave it on the residents that are all here, if you guys are familiar with Clark Street and the way that Mount Rushmore Road comes down, right at Clark Street is where it goes up and then comes right back down again. So when you think about the inability of all the storm sewers and all the drains that are on Mount Rushmore Road, taking all of that water down, and you saw in Mark's picture, this wasn't a gutter that was left off because he'd been gardening. This is an obvious defect, in my opinion, to one of those things, and I think that as part of that, it's an unfair consequence to think that in the future, all of them are going to have to take out flood insurance for the next time it does this. So, thank you.
Thank you. Final comment, Michael, and forgive me if I get this wrong, Salud? Saleda? Okay. Thank you.
Golanda. You know, I've been riding motorcycles for a fair amount of time. I go down I-90, and I see this South Dakota Highway Maintenance Group put on their digital signs, watch out for motorcyclists. I go to Denver, we see it on their signs. As of 1 year ago, I was a recipient of a motorcycle accident that threw me across 2 lanes of Deadwood Avenue, across the opposing lanes. It almost got me hit because a driver did not look to see I was there. A couple weeks ago, coming from the downtown area into the Gap, a minivan pulls over and doesn't look to see where I am, just pulls in. And it's seen by many people. We are a growing community. We have motorcyclists coming in all the time. This isn't just a Sturgis Rally event. How hard is it to ask the City Council, the Chief of Police, and the proper authorities to use the billboards, the public arenas such as KOTA, KEVN, and all of them to say, be alert when you're turning downtown. You know, we as motorcyclists are not maybe the best riders in the world, and we get maybe a little offensive. But when I'm going downtown out of the Gap, I'm looking, and the next thing I see is this car coming at me because it didn't even bother to look, or it's looking at me because it has it. They have their cell phone in hand, and we have no public messages. But the South Dakota Highway Department does it. I just ask, when does the motorcyclists have a right to do this? You know, we have the equal right to the roads as they do. And as a member, not officially sanctioned to say this, but as a member of Rushmore Abate, I just ask, is there a possible way that we can alert these drivers? Because we have a lot of motorcyclists out there. I landed on my head. I walked out of a truck stop with the blood pressure of 165/85. For a year, I dealt with it. I'm alive. What about the ones who will not be alive? So what can we do for the ones who can't be alive? We need to defend those beginning riders because they're not going to look for it. They have not been dragged across 2 lanes of a road. I was thrown off my Harley. I skidded across my road. I woke up to see I was going to be run over by my Harley Davidson, and I kept on rolling. But how do we let these other drivers know to be courteous? And how do we ask law enforcement, when they see these cars trying to push in front or around, to maybe stop some of these guys. Some of these guys are going to get killed. And some of them have never been on a bike but 1 year. So I just ask, can we use our public safety messages to help alert drivers?
Thank you, sir. That concludes our general public comment. We'll now move on to non-public hearing items 3 through 41 and open public comment for items 3 through 35. And I do not have any public comment forms for that, so we will close public comment for non-public hearing items 3 through 35 and move to consent items 3 through 35. Do any of the council members wish to pull any items from the consent agenda? Alderwoman Drew.
Excuse me, did you say 3 through 35, or?
It's 3 through 35.
No.
Okay. Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Council President. I'd like to pull item number 32, please, for separate consideration.
Okay. Any other items? Also, I will be removing item 25 in order to abstain. So do we have a motion to approve consent items 3 through 35 with the exception of 29 and 30, or 25 and 32? We got a motion by Nordstrom and a second by Lewis. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Now to go to item 25. The authorized mayor and finance officer to sign a covenant agreement between the City of Rapid City and Black Hills Federal Credit Union to permit a structure to encroach into the adjacent Plaza Drive right-of-way. Okay, we've got a motion by Darla Drew and a second by Drury. Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Passes with one abstention by me. Next up, item 32. This is from Community Planning and Development Services. Approve a request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc. for Moeller's Limited Partnership for a comprehensive plan amendment to amend the future land use plan from mixed-use commercial to urban neighborhood for property generally described as being located northwest of the intersection of La Crosse Street and East Omaha Street, and we will go to Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Council President. I'd like to make a motion to approve and retain the floor, if I can get a second.
Okay, got a motion by Scott and a second by Lorenzi. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I had already alerted staff or notified staff that since I was on the Planning Commission, and Alderman Roberts isn't here tonight, but he currently serves on the Planning Commission, this is the first time that I can remember very few of these urban neighborhood rezonings come before us, and the staff presents at the Planning Commission level really well and describes the whole thing. So I asked, and Kip Harrington's offered, if the council will indulge us. Kip is willing to go through what he would present if he was presenting to the Planning Commission, because I think this is a very unique infill project, and I'd like the council to at least hear all of it for consideration. I'm in favor of this, and I think it's a topic that the City Council has been having for a while. So if the City Council would indulge me, I'd like Kip to go ahead and present it as if he was presenting to the Planning Commission.
Mr. Harrington?
Thank you and good evening. Kip Harrington, Long Range Planning. This is item 18CA001, which is a comprehensive plan amendment to change the future land use designation of this property, which is, like Alderwoman Scott said, located northwest of Omaha Street and La Crosse Street, from mixed-use commercial to urban neighborhood. Subject property is outlined in yellow. It's currently devoid of development. Way back in the day, it used to be a mobile home park that has since been cleared for numerous years. This shows the difference in future land use categories. The property is currently mixed-use commercial. To the north is urban neighborhood. To the west is employment. And to the east is also urban neighborhood. Major street plan identifies this property as being located along North La Crosse Street, which is also a principal arterial, and East Omaha Street to the south is also designated as a principal arterial on the major street plan. A couple of pictures of the property. As you can see, it's bare ground with some low density or medium density residential to the north up the hill a little ways, and you're facing east here. This is looking to the north, again showing that medium density residential, and then to the north of that is some low density residential single family homes. This is located looking a little bit to the west and the north, and that is the new Wellspring facility that's being built across the street from Roosevelt Ice Arena and the Swim Center. And this is looking to the old Granite GMC that was located along Omaha Street. And again, looking towards the southeast on Omaha Street and the intersection with North Lacrosse Street. And this is looking directly south to Omaha Street. Again, another view to the south of Omaha Street. So what this project does is it changes the use from a commercial use to a more of a residential use and allow for a little higher density development, a little higher density residential. This works really well in the context of the neighborhood because it provides somewhat of a buffer between the more commercially oriented land use along Omaha Street, and then it'll provide a little bit higher density residential, and then moving into a medium density residential with those apartment buildings that you can see in the background of the picture there, and then transitioning into the low density residential and single family homes that are located to the north of this property. Are there any questions?
And thank you, Kip. And then also, just one other thing that I noticed in the report is that access to this property will be taken off of Racine. Is that correct?
Access will be taken off of Racine Street. It currently does not meet criteria manual for width, and there are agreements in place to get that right of way when it becomes necessary.
All right. And thank you. And I know several council members have been able to serve on the Planning Commission, and also the Planning Commission meetings are actually streamed, so you can see this. But I thought this was a good example for all the city council because we have been talking about infill. And thank you, Kip, for presenting it tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We'll now move to Alderman Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kip, just since this is kind of the hot topic of today, flood zone designation on this property. Do you have that?
I do not have this in any of the graphics. Generally, if it is in a flood zone, it will show up on our zoning map. So since it's not on the zoning map, I do not believe this is in any flood zone.
I have that same conclusion, but I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to prepare you for this question, so I don't need it. If you feel comfortable with that answer, I will go with that. But the water runoff would be another issue that I'd be concerned about because the neighboring community down there is experiencing some conditions now, not to the extreme that we've been exposed to tonight, but just some of that extreme exposure that we're having in flood conditions now. We'll be somewhat prepared for it?
I will defer to our Public Works Director on that one.
Okay. And again, I apologize to the staff because I did not realize this was going to be pulled from the agenda. So if you don't have the answers, I'm okay with that.
Is that a question then?
If I may please
All right.
direct a question to Public Works Director.
All right, Mr. Tech.
The flood designation that we're experiencing right now in this area is, I assume we're okay not having this in a floodway, a flood zone, or anything like that.
Yeah, this particular parcel is not in the 100-year map.
Thank you.
Floodplain for the city, Rapid City. That would be south of Omaha Street and to the west.
And then I assume the developer will be putting together a plan for drainage from this property as well.
As part of their development plan, they're required to address stormwater.
And I just want to have the council aware that this is an issue that's in front of us pretty much on a constant basis, is the water runoff and drainage issues. So I just want to make sure everybody understands, well, this is something that we do not want to change. Thank you. I'll yield.
Okay, the motion on the floor is for approval. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. That takes us to the end of the consent items. We will now move on to non-consent items 36 through 41 and open public comment for items 36 through 41. And I do have a public speaker request form from Mike Glandy, but I don't believe Michael is here anymore. So with that, we will open and we will close public comment for items 36 through 41. We're going to move on to item 36. The second reading of ordinance number 6261, an ordinance to amend Rapid City Municipal Code Section 12.24.050 to allow e-bikes on city bicycle and pedestrian trail systems. And the
Second.
All right, we got a motion by Laurenti to approve and a second by Modrick. All in favor? Oh, stand by. We got someone in the queue. Alderwoman Drury. You got in there just in time.
Thank you, Council
Yes.
Chair. I just wanted to say that I was glad for the clarification on this ordinance because I'd had some people approach me earlier about scooters and other electronics on the bike path, and they were concerned about the speed. And so I'm glad that we nailed it down a little further and qualified what was allowed and what would not be allowed. Just wanted to tell staff thank you for that.
Okay.
I yield.
Thank you. So the motion is to approve. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 37, first reading of ordinance number 6258, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. A request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc. for Muller's Limited Partnership for a rezoning request from General Commercial District to Medium Density Residential District for property generally described as being located northwest of the intersection of La Crosse Street and East Omaha Street. And the recommendation is to approve in conjunction, is this the full? Okay, in conjunction with 18CA001. We've got a motion by Laurenti and a second by who? By Drury. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Item 38. First reading of ordinance number 6259, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. A request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc. for Franklin Simpson for a rezoning request from General Agricultural District to Light Industrial District for property generally described as being located southeast of the intersection of North Plaza Drive and Rand Road. Got a motion by Laurenti, a second by Nordstrom, and Alderwoman Drew is in the queue.
Thank you. I'd like to just ask a couple of questions here. I believe Dale Tech might be able to answer this, or it might be Kip, I'm not sure. But when I'm looking at this rezoning here, I had some concerns from a constituent about the use of the road on Rand and let's see here, North Plaza Drive. It seems to be pretty busy, so if this is approved, will there be any improvements there? I know it's kind of early to ask in this process, but do you foresee any improvements to that road? No?
I agree with your assessment. It's too early to ask. I'm not certain where they're at in the process, and as far as any design work, I don't believe that they've done any of that work as far as engineering development plans, so that's one of the stipulations that they are required to do that.
Okay, so when we're looking at light industrial, what are they looking at building there? Like offices, do you know, or do you know what kind of development they're looking at?
I have no idea. Once again, this is to plat property. The ultimate user is unknown until the property transfers and a buyer purchases it and develops it.
Okay, that's enough for me. I'll pass that on. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to approve. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Going to item 39, approve the Rapid City Railroad Quiet Zone draft report. And just a quick note, I believe our speaker is back in the room. Mr. Glanda, did you want to speak on this item? Okay. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because I live down by New York Street. And I understand I'm not against the railroads at all in any form because they're very vital to this town. And I understand their importance. But when they start their horn before New York Street, they ride it all the way through New York Street, ride it all the way down to Omaha, and these are the hours between anywhere between 10 and 4 in the morning. And then when the flour mill down there, when the flour mill gets their 1 car or 2 cars for flour mills, and they spend the next 30 minutes rolling that horn, the area around my address is just inundated, you know. It's like I can see the downtown people being mad because it wakes us up. You know, I live just behind the Journey Museum. It wakes us up. I understand they go toot toot when they hit, toot toot when they leave. It doesn't mean they need to ride that horn all the way through and wake half the neighborhood up, you know. So yes, we do need to enforce a quiet zone, but also there's other residentials like my area, because I have my building. There's probably close to over 800 people that live in my little block that every night depending on the engineer or the freight that's moved, we're going to get woke up. Luckily enough, sometimes we're willing enough to sleep by it. If we're fortunate enough, they're on the other side so they don't hear it. I just happen to be the one that hears it. And then on a hot night with the window open, well, it's quite there. You know, so it's something needs to be done. I agree that it needs to be done downtown, but it needs to go further. You know, really does. 20 minutes of hearing these guys travel through and waking us up because they're either... I understand there's homeless on the rails. I understand there's a lot of things. But when we get anywhere between 10 and 6 in the morning, this guy's riding this horn all the way through. This is, you know, I don't know what to say. But yes, we do need the quiet zone. And maybe these rails, these new ends that we were talking about, did exist in Rapid City back in the 70s. Maybe they need to be put as far as New York Street, because it's unfair to us as tenants off of New York Street to wake us up as well because somebody doesn't know how to get off the horn. And I'd be asked if the city could address how this works. And thank you for your time. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, sir. We go to Alderman Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll make a motion to acknowledge, and I'd like to maintain the floor if I can get a second. Thank you.
Got a motion by Laurenti, second by Lewis, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. As I read through this, some of my questions, and I think part of the letter from the mayor's office was taking questions, and I'm sure all of us will have our ideas and questions and concerns about this particular proposal, but some of the first things that came up to me in my mind were to ensure that this goes through the standard vision process. If vision funds are going to be considered for it, I think it's something we need to be aware of as well. We have less vision funds to work with now for other projects, as we all know, with the Civic Center getting a yes vote quite largely by the public. Some of the other things that I thought about, or questions that I have, just in general at a 30,000-foot level, or cost benefit, or I'm hoping we're going to get some very detailed cost benefit analysis. Some of the things that were stated in the letter talked about downtown residential development and that type of thing. All those things sound good. Now, are they linked, or is there a cause and effect between this particular project and funding it from, say, I think it's around $1.5 to $1.7 million to over $4 million. So it's an expensive project. So to me, cost benefit is extremely important to understand. Participation monetarily by other stakeholders that are going to stand some benefit from some improvement of this quieting proposal. And then other infrastructure ideas that might come forward, hoping there might be some competing infrastructure items that maybe staff would recommend, or that might come from council that could be presented through the vision process as well. So those were just some of my thoughts. I know we're just acknowledging this report. I think we need a lot of information and data, much like priority-based budgeting. Thank you, Sean, for that, because I think that's dovetails right here with this. Does it work with the master plan? Is this part of the city's strategic master plan? Where does it fit in? Is it a first quartile thing, a fourth quartile thing? Obviously, it deals with economic vitality, so I would guess it would be fairly high, but that's just a guess of mine. Ultimately, it comes down to some really in-depth analysis. I'm going to yield so that some of my colleagues, if they want to speak on this item, can. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We got a full queue here. Alderwoman Modrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I ditto what Councilman Laurenti had stated, because this does need to be addressed. I think the city has been living with this problem for a long time, and now is the time to bring it forward, and the study is what puts it on the desk. I don't want to see it on the shelf. That's the key here, is we can't just say, well, we've got to wait for vision funds. We don't even know if we're going to be releasing vision funds. We haven't had that acknowledgement yet, but we need to move this forward. So let's not let this get buried on a shelf. Let's make sure that we move it forward as it needs to be. There's safer ways of doing our railroad crossings, and the horn isn't the way. I do want to acknowledge for the public as well as for Michael on the report that is not being provided tonight. I know when we had committee, we had thought that maybe it was going to be presented again a second time, but obviously the council's informed well enough to not have the presentation for the public at this council meeting, but there is a link to the entire report, and you can read it online or print and read it online. And it is important. It is more effective if you see it in presentation form, and it was at Public Works last Tuesday. If you want to go back and stream it, and you can go in online and stream it as well. It's going to give you a lot of information, and that streaming also has a lot of questions answered to it. So get there, read about it. I would like to see the public more informed than how they're addressing it on Facebook, because this is a solution waiting to counsel out a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Public Works is in the queue. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tech.
Thank you, Alderman Solomon. Actually, the request is to approve the draft report. Since this item went through the MPO, approval of the draft report is necessary. I believe Mr. Laurenti made a motion to acknowledge staff would request that this be an approval item.
Quick question. Can you clarify, just for the council, why approval versus acknowledgement in this situation? Are we approving that this is going to happen? Because if that's the case, that might be a different discussion.
No, this is a draft report, and the draft report just lays out all of the options, and there are no selected options, so it's a draft report, and since there are federal planning dollars involved in this, the process for approval of the draft report is necessary.
Okay, so it's very intentional on how it reads, but we are not approving anything. That's just want to make that very clear, because
that's correct.
That's good. All right, thank you. Alderwoman Drew.
Thank you. I just want to make some comments because, of course, I was at the Public Works meeting when we talked about this, and my initial feeling was that we should approve, but with more reflection, I think the public appetite for more amenities and expensive ones at that is just not, this is not the time. I think that we should look at maybe delaying our action on this as opposed to what Lisa thinks. But we have a different situation in Rapid City. We have an at-risk population that walks a lot at night and during the day. They're on the railroad tracks, they're in the crossings, bikes, walkers. We're an active community. And a lot of the people that are walking on these tracks might not be at the crossroads. They might not be at an intersection, and that horn is going to help them know that a train is approaching. So for our at-risk populations, I don't know if this is a good fit for our city. I really like the idea of a quieter downtown. I like the idea of infill. I like the idea of people living downtown. That's all good. But we just have a different population that we have to consider when we're looking at these kinds of solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to Alderman Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to respond to a couple of things here, I would support a motion to approve this because I think it needs to move to the next step. And I know there's some tweaking that needs to be done to this draft report, but again, I don't want to see this set on the shelf. There is, let me go through the list of things that were brought up as major concerns at this point. The blowing of the horn or whistle that has to take place on the train is not a city regulation. It's a Federal Railroad Authority regulation. So we basically do not have any control over who blows that horn, how long it takes, but there are some minimum standards that they have to comply with. And I know staff has had some informal conversations with the railroad on those very issues. Start off with a proposal right now is to go from Maple Avenue to 11th Street, just for starters. And the concept right now is to take a look at it and see if we can't go to the next expansion of this area. But that's in the future. That's not going to happen right away. Because I'm also getting phone calls about East St. Patrick Street and that area down in that subdivision that's right next to the railroad crossing on East St. Charles as well. Lots of phone calls on that. So they would like to see this take place. The funding issue, I think this is the exciting part of it for me, is that there are several organizations that are involved in this that want to come forward and have already pledged verbally some pledges and some major dollar amounts to make this happen. So the Vision Committee will have to take a look at that, and seeing that the pledges coming forward from the private sector going on this, which I'm also excited about, being a public-private partnership taking place with this project. So it isn't just a city project, it isn't just a vision project, it's also the public is wanting to participate on that, and we will be having another meeting coming up at the end of this month to talk about that and see if what other issues can be looked at and brought up for concern. I'd like to also make sure that everybody understands that the priority-based budgeting is not going to be looking at a CIP until maybe perhaps next year, and this is one of those capital projects that fits into that CIP. So it can also fit into the Vision Fund. It can also fit into this public-private partnerships. So just be patient, folks. We got to look at some other alternative funding on this. And then one other regulation that I believe, and I'd have to have this confirmed, is that if there are pedestrians crossing inside of the railroad way, the railroad has the authority to go ahead and blow that horn to get that attention to that pedestrian that's walking, not in the crosswalks, but they can blow the horn to get that person's attention. It should not happen that often, but it is something that is available to the railroad, so they do not have to not worry about a pedestrian crossing in an unauthorized area. So I'm looking forward to this, and if somebody wants to make a motion to approve this, I would be more than happy to accept that as the motion. So looking forward to making this move forward and getting another report from the staff in a couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you. And I go to Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you. May I ask Mr. Dale Tech a couple follow-up questions? Thank you.
Absolutely.
So Dale, you're saying that this rough draft, because it's going through the MPO, it needs an approval by the council. What does that set the city up to do next by the city council approving this? Kip, you want to help him?
Certainly. This is just a feasibility study to identify the feasibility of creating a railroad quiet zone through downtown Rapid City, to determine what's possible, what improvements would be necessary to make it possible, and an estimate of the required funding if this were to be implemented. This report does not dictate any implementation. It simply lays out the options that would be available for the city if the city chose to pursue a railroad quiet zone through downtown.
Okay, so Kip, then Mr. Dale Tech mentioned that the reason we need this approval is because there's potential federal funds, matching funds or something that could be contributed. Is there a time requirement on that? Is the city council under the gun to come up with a funding source? Do we lose our opportunity? I'm just trying to look for why we're approving this draft report.
The federal funding Mr. Tech referred to are federal planning funds that were spent by the MPO to accomplish the study.
Okay, so the federal funds were for this report only.
That's correct. The federal planning funds paid for 81.95% of the study, and the mayor's office provided the 18.05% match.
Thank you. That helps clarify it for me of what we're approving today. So we're approving the federal funding of this draft report, or of this report.
Correct.
Thank you. And then I won't take too much time since I overspent my time earlier, but I did just want to make a comment. This is a very interesting concept because as we look to the future of Rapid City and we want to develop the downtown area, the noise pollution is a consideration. The issue I have, and I wanted to make sure, and it sounds like a lot of the city council members up here already brought it up, and that is, there is an ordinance that sets out the vision process for all projects to be considered. So I know the mayor had sent the city council members his suggestion that a possible funding source for this would be the Vision Fund. And I just want to make sure that we respect our citizens who voted for this extra penny for the Vision Fund, that the city council follows the process as outlined, so that we make sure that we don't pick and choose interesting or futuristic city projects unless it's gone through the vetting process of a committee. Thank you. Mr. Solomon, I'm giving up 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed. Okay. We'll now go to Alderman Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a substitute motion to approve.
Got a motion by Lewis and a second by Nordstrom.
I think Amanda Scott did a good job of clarifying why we need the motion, Mr. Tech as well, so thank you for that. And I think it's hopefully it starts a part of the process of getting something done about the railroad tracks for the city. In my opinion, they're one of the biggest impediments we have to growing as a city, and that there's some way we could move them. Obviously, we can't afford to do that, but if we could maybe build over top of them or something, do something to, you know, well, every big town you go to has bridges over top of the railroads. And it's just, I think it's a good step in moving forward to eventually accomplish something of that nature, because it does, I mean, it's one of the biggest complaints I get from constituents is the railroad crossings being something that we can't fix, but they always complain about them breaking up their cars. And secondly, it just stops everything when those trains come through town. So, and obviously it's not obviously an EMS issue as well. So there's some way we can start that conversation. Maybe this is the first part of it, to do something about eventually moving forward and dealing with that. I think it's a good step for this community. So thank you.
All right, and if I may, just as a voting member, just to be very, very clear, we are not approving this at all. We're not approving railroad quiet zones. We're not approving $4 million or any money. All we're doing is approving this report so that we can see if we ever want to do something down the road, we have a report ready. So that's just, so we're ultra clear. So I think everybody's got it. All right. So the motion on the floor is to approve. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Now go to Community Planning and Development Services Department items. Item number 40, a request by Sterling Consulting, Inc. for Wagger, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Development Corp. for a preliminary subdivision plan for proposed lots 1 through 6 of Block 10, lots 4 through 10 of Block 19, and lots 1 through 7 of Block 20 of Robbinsdale Addition number 10, generally described as being located east of the intersection of Hanover Drive and Parkview Drive. Motion is to approve with stipulations, I imagine, and a second by Laurenti. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 41, a request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc. for Franklin Simpson for a preliminary subdivision plan for proposed track EE of Fountain Springs Business Park, generally described as being located southeast of the intersection of North Plaza Drive and Rand Road. Okay, so motion by Laurenti to approve with stipulations and a second by Drury. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we are going, excuse me, we are at the, wow, look at that. We're now going to public hearing items 42 through 43, and we will open public hearing comments for items 42 through 43, which I do not have any speaker request forms. So we will close public hearing items for items 42 through 43. And we will move to consent public hearing items 42 through 43. And do any of the council wish to remove an item from the consent public hearing items? No? Okay, but we do have Pauline's in the queue. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to pull 43 to highlight a change in title and that type of thing. So.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve. All right, motion by Scott to approve 42 and a second by Laurenti. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. 43 says to approve resolution number 2018-048 of resolution levying assessment for cleanup and miscellaneous properties. And how should that read?
Heidi had sent out an email late this afternoon with an updated resolution after we met with Kinsley this morning on nuisances. So this should actually be resolution number 2018-048, resolution levying assessments for abatement of nuisances. And that is at your dais, the updated resolution part. The back page that had the actual assessment roll is unchanged.
Okay, anybody want to make that motion? Got a motion by Scott and a second by Drury. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. That will take us to the end of consent public hearing calendar. We'll now move to non-consent public hearing items, which there are none. So go to the bill list, item 44. Pauline Sumption.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no additions to the bill. At $7,638,139.71.
We got a motion to approve by Laurenti, second by Nordstrom. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn by Laurenti, second by Drury. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.